In 1960, he saved $400, borrowed 1,200 more, and stepped into the trading pit with $1,600 to his name. To most, it was nothing, a small sum that couldn't buy a dream. But to him, it was oxygen. It was proof that even a boy from the working streets of Chicago could step into the storm and make the storm listen. The pit was a battlefield, not of guns and steel, but of emotion. Men in suits shouted until their voices broke, waving papers like flags of war. Every second was a gamble, every heartbeat a risk. Fortunes were made and destroyed before lunch. And somewhere in the chaos, a quiet boy stood, still as stone, eyes open, learning. He was small, unnoticed, a shadow moving between giants. His father swept floors not far from where he now stood, and Richard knew what it meant to start from the bottom. He didn't have wealth or power or a name that opened doors. What he had was attention. He watched everything, the way a trader's hands trembled before panic, how laughter filled the air after greed's first victory, how silence crept in before disaster. He began to see a pattern hidden under the noise. The market was not random. It was human nature written in price. While others sought secrets, he sought rhythm. He saw how greed inflated courage, how fear erased reason. Every price move was emotion made visible, and in that realization, he saw the path. The winners were not the smartest, they were the calmest. The losers were not the weakest, they were the most emotional. With $1,600, he placed his first trades. The money was small, but the lesson was immense. He lost, again and again, but he didn't break. He studied his losses, wrote down every impulse, every reaction, every emotion. He began to see that failure was not punishment, it was instruction. The market was not cruel, it was honest. It showed him exactly who he was. Out of those lessons came rules, simple, mechanical, absolute. Buy when strength is real, sell when weakness is certain. Cut losses instantly, let profits breathe. Never argue with the market, never trade from hope, never fear a correction. He wasn't building a way to win, he was building a way to survive. His notebook became his shield. Each rule a line drawn between logic and chaos, each trade a test of obedience. While the crowd shouted, he listened. While they chased, he waited. While they hoped, he acted. The noise around him became irrelevant. He understood that emotion was expensive and that discipline was the only thing that paid back with interest. He didn't chase excitement, he chased silence. And in silence, he found rhythm. His $1,600 grew, not through luck, but through patience. 10,000, 100,000, then millions. He didn't celebrate. He didn't boast, because he understood that the moment pride enters, clarity leaves. The money didn't define him. The discipline did. What made him rich wasn't prediction, but repetition. He didn't try to be right. He tried to be consistent. He turned trading into meditation. Every chart, every number, every rule became part of a ritual that purified emotion. He learned to let go of control, to follow the current instead of fighting it. The market, he realized, was not to be conquered. It was to be obeyed, and obedience, calm, consistent, disciplined obedience, was the rarest form of intelligence. The others mocked him for his simplicity, for his cold precision. But the truth was that simplicity is hard. It demands faith, it demands patience, it demands the courage to do nothing when the crowd is screaming to act. Most men in the pit were addicted to movement. He was addicted to restraint. He discovered that wealth wasn't the reward for risk. It was the reward for control. Every dollar he made came from the space between impulse and action, the quiet pause where emotion died and logic spoke. That's where he lived. That's where he built his fortune. He wasn't chasing money anymore. He was chasing mastery. The $1,600 had already done its job. It had bought him something far more valuable than capital. It had bought him clarity. He understood that the real game wasn't played in the market. It was played in the mind. He once wrote a single line in his notebook: "The calm mind outlasts the storm." It wasn't a quote. It was a revelation. Because in a world drowning in noise, the one who stays silent wins. In the pit, surrounded by chaos, fear, and greed, he found something extraordinary. He found rhythm in disorder, peace in panic, and truth inside uncertainty. And from that truth, a legend was born. He learned that markets do not reward brilliance, they reward discipline. Every man in the pit thought he was smart enough to outguess the crowd, fast enough to catch the top or the bottom, confident enough to hold when fear set in. Richard Dennis realized intelligence was overrated. The market did not care how clever you were, it cared how consistent you could remain when everything around you screamed to do the opposite. His weapon was not prediction, but patience, and his shield was not luck, but structure. He built his system like a craftsman, slowly, deliberately, without the illusion of perfection. He knew it would fail sometimes because failure was part of its design. What mattered was survival. He treated every trade as one small event inside a long story, and the only way to finish the story was to stay in the game. He made peace with losing. Every small loss was a tuition payment to truth, like a reminder that humility was cheaper than arrogance. Most men paid for pride with their entire accounts. He paid only in lessons. He studied the crowd like an anthropologist. Their movements were predictable. Panic came first, then denial, then surrender. Greed came the same way, only in reverse. The patterns repeated endlessly. He realized the market was not random, it was emotional mathematics. Every rise and crash was the same rhythm of human weakness, disguised by new headlines. He didn't fight it, he flowed with it. When prices moved strongly, he followed. When they drifted sideways, he waited. When they turned violently, he stepped aside. He didn't guess, he reacted. His first principle was simple: cut losses fast. The second, let profits grow. The third, never add to a loser. The fourth, never break the first three. These weren't slogans, they were survival laws. He saw too many traders destroy themselves because they couldn't obey the simplest truths. They prayed instead of acting. They hoped instead of cutting. They dreamed instead of adapting. He decided he would rather be mechanical and alive than emotional and bankrupt. He turned trading into ritual. Each morning, he reviewed his charts like a monk studying scripture. Lines and patterns weren't numbers to him, they were language. The language of fear and greed, of exhaustion and momentum. He learned to read the unspoken emotion behind price action. Every candle was a confession, every breakout a decision, every collapse a surrender. And beneath it all, he saw the same truth: people never change, only prices do. He practiced detachment until it became instinct. When he entered a trade, he accepted loss as a possibility before it even happened. That acceptance gave him freedom. Fear disappears when you no longer resist it. The market, he said, takes its pound of flesh from those who refuse to pay in discipline, so he paid in advance. The pit was chaos, but inside his head there was silence. He could feel the noise pass around him like wind against a rock. The louder they shouted, the calmer he became. He found stillness in the center of madness. That stillness became his edge. While others reacted, he waited for the market to confirm. He didn't trade to feel alive. He traded to stay aligned. Every decision had to come from process, not impulse. His fortune grew quietly. $1,600 became 20,000, then 200,000, then a million. But he never saw himself as rich. Money was only the echo of his behavior. It came and went like breath. What mattered was rhythm, the rhythm between emotion and logic, between chaos and clarity. He didn't celebrate profits because celebration creates expectation, and expectation is the root of failure. He preferred neutrality. The less he felt, the more he saw. He once said that the market rewards those who can do nothing longer than others. Waiting was his superpower. Patience was not the absence of action, it was the highest form of action. To wait without boredom, to observe without judgment, to act only when structure aligned with truth, that was mastery. Most traders lost because they couldn't stand still. They traded for stimulation, not for precision. He designed rules to protect himself from human nature. When a trade went his way, he added only when the trend confirmed strength. When it didn't, he exited immediately. He called it pyramiding with proof. Never average down, always average up. It went against every instinct of the crowd, but instinct is what destroys the crowd. To him, pain was a signal, not a problem. Discomfort meant he was doing the right thing. If trading felt easy, it was probably wrong. He believed wealth was the side effect of good behavior. Behavior built patterns, and patterns built empires. His empire wasn't measured in dollars, but in control. The ability to act without emotion, to endure without panic, to think clearly while surrounded by noise. He realized the greatest market was not the one outside, but the one inside, the endless battle between logic and impulse. Winning that battle was the only real profit. At night, he would walk home through empty streets, the city humming quietly beneath the streetlights. He would think about how predictable the chaos was. Every man in that pit thought he was unique, but they all made the same mistakes at different prices in different years. Fear, greed, pride, the holy trinity of destruction. The market had no mercy, yet it was perfectly fair. It gave everyone the same opportunity to fail. He didn't see himself as lucky. He saw himself as prepared. Luck visits everyone, but only discipline keeps it company. Most people waste their fortune the same way they waste their focus, by believing the moment will last forever. Richard knew nothing lasts, not trends, not profits, not success. That awareness kept him grounded. He understood that real confidence comes from humility. The moment you think you've mastered the market is the moment it starts teaching you another lesson. He stayed a student forever. His rules were alive, flexible, evolving, but his principles were carved in stone. Protect capital, respect trends, obey stops, trust evidence, doubt emotion. He believed simplicity was sacred because complexity hides fear. His wealth grew, but his demeanor stayed quiet. He didn't buy yachts or show off. He lived modestly, studied endlessly, and taught himself to see beyond numbers. Trading wasn't his job, it was his mirror. Every day it showed him exactly who he was. And when he finally looked in that mirror without resistance, he understood that success was never about money. It was about mastery of mind. Richard Dennis turned $1,600 into millions, not by predicting the market, but by surrendering to truth. The truth that the market is never wrong, the truth that emotion is the real enemy, and the truth that the calm mind, above all else, outlasts the storm. He had proven that discipline could build wealth, but a question began to follow him like a shadow. Could discipline be taught? Could ordinary people with no experience or background be trained to think like professionals, to act without emotion, to follow a system over instinct? Richard Dennis believed they could. He believed trading success wasn't born from genius or luck, but from rules. He wanted to prove that with the right structure, anyone could win. So he decided to run an experiment that would change financial history. He called it the Turtle Project. The name came from a conversation he once had while traveling in Singapore, where he saw a turtle farm. He joked that traders could be grown just like turtles. If you gave them the right environment, they would thrive. The idea became his obsession. He wanted to create traders from scratch, people who had never set foot in a trading pit, wrote 10, who didn't even know how markets moved. He would train them for 2 weeks, give them his rules, and hand them real money. If they succeeded, it would prove his philosophy that success is systematic, not personal. The financial world laughed at him. They said trading couldn't be taught. They said instinct couldn't be replaced by rules. But Richard didn't argue. He prepared. He placed an ad in the Wall Street Journal. Richard Dennis is accepting applications for a trading program. Experience not required. Hundreds applied, from teachers, engineers, musicians to soldiers, men and women from all walks of life. He selected a small group, a mix of personalities and ages. Some were calm thinkers, others were impulsive dreamers. It was the perfect laboratory for psychology. In a quiet office in Chicago, he gathered them and began to teach. He didn't talk about predictions, forecasts, or secret indicators. He talked about discipline, risk, and obedience. He showed them how to identify trends, how to cut losses, how to pyramid profits. He repeated the same truths that had built his fortune. Trade with the trend, not against it. Losses are part of the process. Never risk more than you can survive. Follow your system exactly. He warned them that their biggest enemy would not be the market, it would be themselves. Some of the students didn't believe him. They wanted complexity, special tools, insider tricks. But the ones who listened, who followed his rules mechanically, began to see results. They made money, real money. Their accounts grew while others froze. In a matter of weeks, ordinary people who had never traded before were executing disciplined trades like professionals. It shocked the financial world. The turtles were thriving. Richard's partner, Bill Eckhart, was skeptical at first. He believed trading required instinct, something you couldn't teach. But when he saw the results, even he had to admit the truth. The students who followed the rules exactly, without deviation, without emotion, outperformed nearly everyone else. The experiment proved that consistency could outperform talent, and that the mind could be trained to replace impulse with structure. But not everyone succeeded. A few of the turtles broke the rules. They let greed creep in. They doubled down on losers. They ignored stops, chased reversals, or tried to outsmart the system. Their downfall was fast and merciless. The same market that rewarded discipline punished arrogance. They were reminders that rules protect only those who obey them. Richard didn't blame them. He said, "The system is simple. Following it isn't." Because following rules means fighting your own psychology every day. It means surrendering ego, delaying gratification, trusting math over emotion. Most people can't do that, not because they're stupid, but because they're human. The experiment revealed the real truth about success. It's not about knowledge, it's about behavior. The turtles who survived went on to make millions. They managed funds, started firms, and became legends in their own right. Their success wasn't luck, it was the visible result of invisible discipline. They had learned to think in probabilities, not outcomes, to view every trade as one of thousands, not the only one, to treat loss as routine, not personal. Richard had proven that the mindset of a professional could be replicated, and that system could create success faster than instinct ever could. He watched their growth with quiet satisfaction. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about confirmation. His entire life had been one long argument with chaos, and now he had proof that order wins. The market wasn't a mystery. It was a mirror, and anyone who learned to see clearly could profit from it. He had turned philosophy into method and method into evidence. But behind his calm confidence was a deeper reflection. He realized that the true value of his experiment wasn't in proving others wrong. It was in showing how fragile human discipline really is. Even with clear rules, even with proof that they worked, many still broke them. Emotion was that powerful. Fear and greed were eternal. The market was just the arena where they revealed themselves. He began to see trading not as competition, but as meditation, a way to test the limits of self-control, a daily practice of restraint. Every decision was a reflection of character. Every hesitation, every impulse, every rush of pride was a mirror showing where the mind was still untrained. He said that the market is the most honest teacher in the world because it punishes lies instantly. His students learned that the true reward of trading wasn't wealth, it was awareness. The market taught them who they were. It exposed weaknesses, magnified fears, stripped illusions. It showed them that patience was more valuable than prediction, that humility lasted longer than confidence. Many would later say that Richard Dennis didn't just teach them how to trade, he taught them how to think. In the years that followed, he stayed true to his philosophy. Markets changed. Computers took over, systems evolved, but the principles never aged. Trends still moved. Fear still dominated. Greed still destroyed. The same human story replayed in new forms. He didn't chase innovation for its own sake. He understood that technology changes tools, but never temperament. The edge was always psychological. When asked what he learned from creating the turtles, he said one sentence that summarized everything he believed. "You can publish my rules in the newspaper, and nobody will follow them." That was his quiet truth. The knowledge was free. The discipline was rare. The real secret wasn't the system, it was the mind capable of obeying it. He proved that anyone can make money once. But to do it for decades, to survive both bull and bear markets, to grow through panic and collapse, that required something beyond intelligence. It required faith in process and a willingness to endure boredom, doubt, and fear without breaking. Richard Dennis built more than a fortune. He built a philosophy of calm in a world built on noise. He taught the world that wealth is not created by knowing more, but by feeling less. That freedom is not the absence of rules, but the mastery of them. And that in the silence of patience, even chaos can become predictable. He became a legend, but legends carry weight. After the turtle experiment, the financial world called him a genius, a prophet, the man who turned logic into gold. But Richard Dennis never believed in genius. He believed in pressure. Success, he said, doesn't test a person's intelligence. It tests their tolerance for uncertainty. The higher he climbed, the more fragile everything became. The market had made him rich, but it also reminded him every day that wealth has no loyalty. He had built his fortune on rules, but even rules can bend under emotion. The late 1980s brought a new kind of storm: bigger markets, faster trades, computers replacing instinct with code. He was still young, powerful, and admired, but that admiration was a dangerous drug. People listened to every word he said, and somewhere, quietly, he began to feel the pull of his own myth. He wanted to prove that even after all his experiments, he could still beat the market, still control the chaos that had once bowed to him. So he broke his own rule, the one he had taught every student. Never believe you're bigger than the system. He began to take larger positions, convinced his experience could override his own limits. At first, it worked. Profits came fast, confidence grew faster. The same discipline that had built his empire began to fade, replaced by instinct disguised as intuition. The market, as always, waited. It rewards arrogance with silence, then it takes everything back. The losses began slowly. A small mistake here, a missed stop there. Then the rhythm changed. What had once been a system turned into a series of justifications. The trend will reverse. This time is different. He had heard those excuses from countless traders over the years. Now they were his. The market doesn't punish failure, it punishes denial. And denial was the most human thing about him. He lost millions. The empire built on $1,600 trembled. To the public, it looked like a fall from grace. But to him, it was something else. It was the market teaching him its final lesson, that discipline is not something you master once. It's something you must defend every day. He said later that success breeds carelessness because it makes you forget the fear that kept you alive. Comfort is the slow death of awareness. He returned to his rules, not to rebuild wealth, but to rebuild clarity. He looked at every mistake and saw the same truth he had taught his students. The enemy is never the market, it's you. The moment you stop following your system, the market doesn't need to defeat you. You defeat yourself. He began again, quietly, methodically, humbly. No interviews, no headlines, just charts, notes, and silence. He called it his return to the beginner's mind. He learned to appreciate the fragility of discipline, how it can erode not from failure, but from success. He said success is a mirror that blinds you with your own reflection. You stop seeing risk, you start seeing proof. And in that proof, you forget the foundation that built it. His loss didn't destroy him, it purified him. It stripped away pride, noise, and illusion. It left only the core of his philosophy, truth through structure. He realized that money had never been the goal, awareness had. Every dollar earned, every dollar lost was a lesson in perception. He didn't regret losing millions because the experience reminded him of something far rarer than wealth: perspective. He began to write again, not about methods, but about psychology, about how people use money to hide from uncertainty and how the market reveals their real nature. He taught that a trader's greatest weapon is not courage, but humility. Courage makes you take risks. Humility makes you survive them. To win, you must be willing to lose without resistance. The market doesn't reward those who fight it. It rewards those who flow through it with awareness. He often said the difference between arrogance and confidence is silence. The arrogant man talks, the confident one listens. His students visited him over the years, now successful in their own right. They asked him what he had learned from his fall. He told them the truth, that discipline is not an achievement, it's a daily confession. You wake up and prove it again. You don't own mastery, you rent it, and rent is due every morning. They asked if he feared losing again. He smiled. Fear, he said, is good. It keeps you awake. The absence of fear is not strength, it's blindness. He came to see wealth as a cycle, not a destination. Money flows through time the same way tides move through the ocean. It belongs to no one, only passing through those who are ready to hold it with balance. The goal is not to capture it, but to use it to see more clearly. For him, trading had become meditation, a mirror reflecting how his inner world moved. Every loss was still a test of patience, every gain a test of restraint. He spoke less and observed more. The city that once echoed with his name had forgotten him, but he didn't mind. Fame, like fortune, was another illusion. What mattered was stillness, the same stillness he had discovered decades earlier, standing in the middle of that chaotic pit. He no longer needed to prove anything. The numbers were irrelevant. The lesson was eternal. The mind that can stay calm while everything collapses is untouchable. He once wrote, "The greatest wealth a man can have is clarity." Clarity costs you everything: your pride, your comfort, your illusions. But once you have it, no loss can touch you. Because clarity isn't built on outcome, it's built on truth. And truth doesn't fluctuate like price. It stands still beneath every chart, every market, every life. By the time his career slowed, Richard Dennis had already transcended the game he once mastered. The $1,600 that began his story had multiplied, vanished, and returned in countless forms. But what remained was not the money. It was the philosophy, the understanding that markets are simply mirrors of human emotion and that those who master themselves can never truly lose. In the end, he didn't see himself as a trader. He saw himself as a student of behavior. The market had been his teacher, his adversary, and his reflection. It taught him that order can exist inside chaos, that patience can outlast power, and that simplicity is the highest sophistication. He walked away quietly, leaving behind rules, stories, and a generation of traders shaped by his discipline. He proved that freedom isn't found in wealth or fame, it's found in mastery of self. The market may rise and fall forever, but the calm mind, the one that listens more than it speaks, will always outlast the noise. He walked away from the noise, not in defeat, but in peace. The trading floors that once echoed his name were now silent, replaced by screens, algorithms, and faceless data. Yet within the rhythm of those glowing numbers, he could still hear the same heartbeat. Fear, greed, hesitation, pride. Nothing had changed. The world had evolved, but human nature had not. And that, he thought, was why the market would never die. It was merely a mirror, endlessly reflecting the same emotions across generations. He had started with $1,600 and built an empire. He had lost millions and made them back again. But what he carried through it all was not money. It was awareness. The awareness that the market was never an enemy, but a reflection. Every mistake he had made came from emotion, and every success came from discipline. He had proven that truth once for himself, and again through the students he taught. But he knew even truth fades if not protected by discipline. Now he lived quietly, far from the crowd, yet his mind remained sharp, restless, alive. He rose before dawn, studying charts the way a painter studies light. The lines no longer spoke of urgency. They were stories, echoes of human psychology. The same panic buying, the same desperate selling, the same denial wrapped in new technology. He smiled at the repetition. To most, it was chaos. To him, it was rhythm. He could still hear it, the pulse of collective emotion, the eternal pattern of human behavior. He believed the market was the most honest teacher alive. It stripped away all illusions. In that pit, no one could hide behind charm or excuses. You either followed your rules or you paid the price. The market didn't punish people for being wrong. It punished them for refusing to admit they were wrong. That, he thought, was pure justice. No favoritism, no forgiveness, only reflection. And once you saw it clearly, you could never unsee it. He often told himself that every loss was a lesson disguised as subtraction. The market takes something from you to make space for something greater: awareness, humility, clarity. Most people resist that pain. They call it unfair. But he had learned that growth demands payment, and the market collects without emotion. If you want wisdom, you must pay with comfort. He saw greed hiding beneath ambition, fear hiding beneath caution. Both emotions claimed to protect you, yet both imprisoned you in the same mistakes. The trader afraid to lose never takes a chance. The one obsessed with profit never stops gambling. Both perish the same way, only at different speeds. He had been both, once. The difference was that he stayed long enough to see through the disguise. He said the market was not random, it was recursive. It repeats what people refuse to learn. The same behavior, the same outcomes, generation after generation. You can change technology, laws, even the names of instruments, but you cannot change the mind that drives them. The mind remains the constant variable, forever trapped in the loop of desire and fear. To escape that loop is to see. To see is to be free. Later, he no longer measured success in numbers, but in peace. How still could he remain when the world shook around him? How clearly could he see without rushing to act? The old Richard would have called it weakness. The new Richard knew it was mastery. Action is easy, restraint is power. He no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. He only needed to stay aligned with truth, with process, with himself. He often remembered that morning in 1960 when he borrowed $1,200 and stepped into the pit for the first time. He could still recall the smell of sweat, the noise, the electricity in the air. He remembered being afraid, not of losing money, but of being invisible. That fear had driven him for years. Now invisibility was peace. He had traded recognition for clarity, and it was the best trade of his life. He watched the new generation of traders, young, hungry, impatient. They had faster tools, infinite data, endless information, yet the same blindness. They mistook speed for intelligence, data for understanding. They still broke their own rules. They still chased illusions. He wanted to tell them that mastery has nothing to do with technology. The edge is not in the machine, it's in the mind that knows when not to use it. He wrote notes to himself, reminders that had once been rules and had now become truths. Never fight the trend, never argue with reality. Risk little, wait long, detach completely. Each sentence was a seed planted in silence. He believed that if a man could truly live by these words, he could survive anything: the market, the world, himself. He said the greatest illusion of wealth was permanence. You never truly own money, you only hold it until the next lesson arrives. Every profit carries a hidden cost, the cost of attachment. If you cling to profit, you lose perspective. If you cling to loss, you lose time. Freedom exists only in letting go. The less you hold, the more you see. His students sometimes visited him, asking if he missed the thrill of the pit. He would shake his head and say, the thrill was never the point. Excitement is expensive. Stillness compounds. They didn't always understand, and he didn't need them to. Understanding comes only through experience, and experience demands loss, the kind that burns illusions and leaves wisdom behind. In solitude, he found meaning in simplicity. He no longer needed complexity to feel intelligent. He understood that clarity is the final stage of sophistication. To see the market as it is, not as you wish it to be, is enlightenment. Every rule he had ever written led to the same truth. Stop trying to control what cannot be controlled. Align with it, flow with it, trust its rhythm. Sometimes he stood by the window, watching city lights flicker like charts in motion. Every building, every car, every person represented a different trade, a decision driven by hope, fear, or survival. Life, he thought, is the same as the market. You can't predict it, you can only prepare for it. The process is what saves you when the noise begins. In his final years, he wrote one last line in his notebook. It wasn't about money or markets or rules. It said, the calm mind outlasts everything. He underlined it once, then closed the book. He had come full circle, from chaos to clarity, from noise to silence. The $1,600 that began his story had turned into fortunes, vanished hot, and returned again in countless forms. But what remained untouched by time or price was truth. He smiled, knowing that no chart could measure it, and no market could take it away. Because in the end, the richest man is not the one who wins the most trades, but the one who no longer needs to win at all.